Hello champions and future chess champions. Today I will show you one of the best games of the world, 5th champion Max Euwe. He plays with white against Flohr solo. Let's go. d4, d5, c4, c6, same is love. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3. This is the main position of Semislav, and here black has two main moves, dc4 taking the pawn and playing e6. In the game, black played g6, and this is not a very good move. Why? This is a hybrid between Semislav and Grunfeld. Which one is the Grunfeld? After d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5. This is the Grunfeld. And in Grunfeld, black mostly are playing bishop g7, short castle, or sometimes even without short castle, with c5, fighting for the center. Whenever in Grunfeld black is playing c6, it is a passive setup for them. And in the game, what happened? After g6, black went to Grunfeld with c6 passive variation. Bishop f4, good move. Before playing e3 and limiting the bishop on c1, white developed the bishop first, and after bishop g7, now e3. Short castle, and here queen b3, very interesting move by Max Euwe. He could also play bishop e2 with the idea short castle, but after bishop e2, if black takes dc4, white will lose the time by taking the c4 pawn. After queen b3, what achieved Euwe? He's putting pressure on d5. For example, now black cannot play knight bd7, because after cd5, white is winning a pawn. And after queen b3, black also cannot play bishop g4, putting here a pin. First of all, after bishop g4 there is no pin, so white can easily play knight e5, but now when the bishop is not on c8, b7 pawn is also free, white can take the b7 pawn. After queen b3, black took dc4. And now the good thing of white is that they didn't play bishop e2 and then bishop c4, but bishop c4 in one move, and now they have developed the queen on b3, which is developed very good. Together they are putting some pressure on f7, and also after white plays short castle, queen is not on d1, and the d1 square is free for the rook, and the rook most probably will stay on c1, and somewhere e4, and white will have a good center and space advantage. After dc4, bishop c4, black played knight bd7. And now for white would be okay to play short castle. However, Euwe did an interesting move. He played knight e5. From one point, here exchanges are good for black. Why? Because here white has a central pawn on d4, while black has c6 pawn. And because of this pawn, and as that white can in future play e4 as well, white has a center and space advantage. And whenever we have space advantage, we should try to avoid exchanges. But what's the idea of knight e5 move? White wants to remove the d7 knight, which could support black to play c5 at some point and fight for the center. And after knight e5 also, if black takes knight e5, bishop e5 is gonna be kind of positional pin. If black moves the knight, white will exchange their bishop, which is not very good because he has two central pawns, so he will exchange these bishops. That was the idea of knight e5. Now also, white is attacking the f7 pawn, and black has no time for moves like knight b6. Queen e8 was played in the game. Black wants to wait, and if knight d7, now black will take knight d7, and then queen e8 is not just defending the f7 pawn, but also will support e5 move. After knight e5, queen e8, black's another idea is to play knight h5, taking the f4 bishop, and later take on e5. After queen e8 here, I've added another good move, bishop e2, back. This is a prophylactic move against knight h5. Black of course cannot play knight h5 because after bishop h5 their pawn structure will be ruined. Also with bishop e2, sooner or less the rook on a1 should be on c1 on half open line, and there is no bishop on c4 in front of the rook. Let's go back to the game. So bishop e2 was played, here black took knight e5, bishop e5, and now black should have played knight d7, with the idea to exchange the bishops and then play with e5. However, then, after short castle, e5, rook a d1, white still has advantage, because we are ahead in development. Black has still need to develop the bishop and the rook on a8, and the knight on d7 is staying in front of these pieces. If e4, rook d4, then rook d1, on the game there will be one open line, and it will control white. After knight e5, bishop e5, black played queen d8 back, with the idea after short castle to play queen b6, and offer opponent to go to endgame. Now I offer you to pause the video and think what we should do here for white. We should exchange the queens, not exchange. If we want to exchange, should we take on b6 or should we allow opponent to take on b3? Or if we want to keep the queens, where we should retreat the queen. Let's pause the video and think a bit before we go ahead. Okay, now if we take queen b6, after a b6, opponent rook on a8 is opened, and also b7, b6 pawns are doubled, but they are not weak. They would be weak if there was not c6 pawn. Now they are not weak, because c6 pawn will support black to play b5, in future b4, so these pawns are more probably strength than a weakness. If white allows black to take queen b3, now after a b3, okay, the rook is opened, but there is no c3 pawn and it's not supporting white to play b4, b5, and now they are becoming weak pawns. But the most important factor here is this: because of d4 pawn, white has a space advantage, and the general rule is this: if you have space advantage, you should try to keep the pieces, especially the queens. That's why Euwe decided to keep the queens, and he did it with a tempo, taking the e7 pawn. Rook e8 was played, rook ac1, and bishop f8. Black wants to play in future e6 and attack the queen on a3, and still try to somehow exchange the queens. But better idea for black, in order to exchange the queens, would be here to play a5 and then queen b4. After rook c1, bishop f8 was played, knight a4, attacking the queen. Queen d8, rook fd1, another rook comes to the game, knight d5. Again, better would be to play knight d7, attacking the bishop, and after bishop g3 to play e5. However, still, after queen b3, because black has problems with development of their queen side, the knight d7 stays in front of these pieces, and also knight d7 cannot just leave his position, because rook d1 will ask lots of questions to this queen on d8. That's why here still white is better. But anyway, black should have come to this position. After rook fd1, black played knight d5. Now the knight doesn't control the e4 square, and here we go, e4, white is taking the full center. e6, with tempo attacking the queen, queen f3. Knight b6. Black wants to exchange the knights. Should we exchange or not? I offer you to pause the video and think. Okay, I bet you know the answer. We have space advantage and we don't want to exchange the knights, especially we don't want to take knight b6 and open opponent rook. After knight b6, Euwe played knight c5. In future, white is going to play b4 and have here a very strong knight on c5. Black played knight d7, insisting to exchange the knight on c5, because now also they are taking the e5 bishop. And now knight d7. Okay, we exchanged the knights, but we didn't open opponent rook on a8. Bishop at d7. Otherwise, if queen d7, there will be queen f6, and there is no defense against checkmate. Knight d7, bishop d7 was played, and bishop f6 taking the queen on d8. And now white is getting a very strong bishop. If black moves the queen, as was played in the game, after queen a5, white has here a very strong bishop. But if black played here bishop e7, look what happened. Black here has all these pawns on the light square, and they have here a guard who is defending the weaknesses of dark squares. After bishop e7, queen e7, now the dark squares are very weak. In the game, after bishop f6, black played queen a5, keeping their guard over the king side. And here, white has a very strong bishop on f6, and there is just one guard defending the king on g8. Is it possible to organize an attack? And if yes, how to do that? Here I offer you to pause the video and try to find a genius way which I've found how to start attack on opponent king on g8. Okay. For attacking the king on g8, there are a few ways. Whether to push the pawns like here, h4, h5, or try to bring this rook closer to the king on g8. But how to bring the rook? If rook c3, there is no rook h3, queen is staying on f3 in front of the way of rook. Also the a2 pawn is hanging. Here many of us would play here a3, just defend the pawn. Here we have a solid advantage because of center and space advantage, strong bishop on f6, and then figure it out how to continue to attack. But not world 5th champion. What he did in the game, rook c5, fantastic move. What's the idea? First of all, this is an exchange sacrifice. However, opponent guard is very important. If black takes here bishop c5, then after dc5, the bishop on f6 is not a bishop, it's a monster. Additionally, the d7 bishop is hanging, and if, for example, queen c7, just queen goes to h6 and over. Queen e3, and there is just no defense against queen h6 and queen g7 checkmating idea. So after rook c5, black cannot give this bishop for an exchange, otherwise the bishop on f6 will kill them. So black took on a2, the logical continuation, and here follows the next brilliant move by Euwe. What was his plan with rook c5? Are you free to pause the video and find it? Okay, there was no way to transfer the rook from the third rank because the queen was in front of it, and what he's doing here, Euwe, he's transferring his rook to h5. Great move, using the tactic that black cannot take gh5 because bishop f6 is killing the king on g8. Just queen g3 check, and after bishop g7, queen g7, it's a checkmate. After rook h5, what can do here black? If they play here bishop g7, trying to exchange our strong attacker on f6. Now after bishop g7, king g7, it comes the typical attacking rook sacrifice. If you're ready to pause the video and find it. Okay, I bet you guessed it. Rook h7, king h7, queen f7, and no matter it's king h8 or king h6, in both cases rook d3, rook comes to h3, and king on h6 will get some checkmate. We don't have problems with the back rank, because whenever queen a1 or queen b1, bishop f1 just. Queen and rook will solve the problem of this king on h6 alone. After rook h5, black could take on b2. And now what's the idea of white? It would be an interesting option to play here queen h3. Black cannot take on h5 because queen g3 checkmate, and trying to take on h7 and then rook h8 checkmate. But then black takes queen e2, and now d1 rook is not just rook, but it's also gonna be a checkmate from the back rank, and the h5 rook is also hanging. So after queen b2 here, the winning move is bishop e5, with the idea to play queen f6 and then queen h8 checkmate, and now black's position is lost. For example, after bishop g7, now if you take bishop g7, king g7, and again rook h7, here black survives. Because after king h7, queen f7, king h6, we have the same position, but the opponent took the b2 pawn. And now when we play rook d3, black is in time to take queen e2, and after rook h3 to give their queen and defend the king. But there are easier way. After bishop e5, when black plays bishop g7, there is rook h7 immediately. White wants to take the g7, black cannot take e5 because queen f7 is a checkmate. And after rook h7, king h7, queen f7. Now white wants to take queen g7 with the checkmate. Rook g8 is the only move, and now rook comes. After queen e2, rook h3, queen h5, again black's only move to give the queen, but now after rook h5, gh5, white can take queen h5 check, go back, and now take the d7 bishop. Now white has a queen and 5 pawns, against opponent are 2 rooks and 4 pawns, but now b7 and e6 pawn additionally are hanging, and black has very weak king on h7. For example, if black plays here a5 trying to give all these pawns and push their pawn to a1, the king on h7 is in danger. White can play here f4, a4, f5, with the idea to play f6, with the idea to play fe6, but also after a3, now we are not in time to play f6 because after a2, a1 is coming. But after f5, a3, there is a queen f7, great move. What is the idea? Are you ready to pause the video and find it? Okay, white wants to play queen in g6 check, and after king h8, queen h5, or queen h6 even, with a checkmate. After queen f7, if black takes here e5, e5 move is just winning, but queen f5 is just checkmate. If king h6, bishop f4 is a checkmate, and if king h8, queen h3 or queen h5, both are checkmates. This was a few variations that could occur after rook h5, queen b2, bishop e5. In the game after rook h5, black played here e5, opening their bishop and taking control of the h3 square, not allowing white to play their queen h3 move. But now the problem of the e5 move is that after the e5, the rook is opened and also the d7 bishop hangs. Black cannot take b2 because d7 bishop hangs. Bishop e6 was played, and now queen f4. What's the idea of queen f4? White cannot play queen h3, but now they want to play queen f4, queen h4 with the winning maneuver. After queen h4, h7 hangs, black again can never take on h5 because just the check, and it's a checkmate, and if h6, just rook h6. Rook h8 is coming, if bishop h6, queen h6, with queen g7 and queen h8, checkmate which black cannot stop. After bishop e6, queen f4, black took b2, the only move. Black's idea after queen h4 is to take on e2, and now you have seen this already. Black attacking the d1 rook, which is a checkmate, and also the h5 rook hangs. After queen b2, what did they then? Simply bishop f1. Bishop doesn't hang, and also it defends the king on g1 from the back rank checkmates. In the game, black played here bishop e7. If they played here bishop g7, then after bishop g7, king g7, queen h6, check. And because the rook on d1 is also opened, black in future cannot try to save the king on the queen side. After king g8, queen h7, king f8, queen h8, king e7, queen f6, check, and there is no king d7, the rook is there. And after king f8, rook h8 is a checkmate. After bishop f1, black played bishop e7. Black's idea after queen h6 is to take bishop f6. And now the queen defends the h8 square. After ef6, queen f6, queen h7, king f8, and there is no checkmate. But after bishop e7, simply queen h4 taking the h7 pawn. Again, black cannot take the h5 rook because queen g5 gonna be checkmate after king f8. And after queen h4, how to defend against rook h7. Black found an interesting idea and played here bishop c5. What's the thing? Now if you take rook h7, queen on h4 is too busy defending the h7 and also defending the f2. And black can use this factor. How? I offer you to pause the video and think. Okay, if you say it here bishop f2, you are almost right. Yeah, if here white takes queen f2, after queen f2, king f2, you take the h7 rook, but now white can play king h1, and you cannot win the h4 queen because rook h8 is coming with a checkmate. So that's why here after rook h7, the correct one would be to play queen f2. Now we are forced to take queen f2 because after king h1, there is a queen g1 with a checkmate. And if you take here queen f2, really after bishop f2, king f2, king h7, now black is winning. That's why after bishop c5, just rook h6. White is planning to bring another rook. Why they didn't play rook d3 immediately? Because of the same queen f2. Queen f2, bishop f2, king f2, gh5. Black is exchange up, the king is a little bit in more danger, and this look like after rook g3, king f8, rook g7, there is no defense against rook h7, rook h8, but there is. The rook will be moved somewhere, rook b8 or c8, it's same. And after rook h7, king e8, and after rook h8, king runs to d7, there is no another rook on d1. That's why after bishop c5, rook h6. Now, white wants to play rook d3, rook f3, defends the f2 square, and now queen is free. Rook does his job, he defends the f2, and next white wants to take on h7. And after rook h6, there is no idea against this. In the game, black played a5, trying to push the pawn, but rook d3. Now it's coming rook f3. Black decided to give the bishop and played here bishop f2. Queen f2, king f2, and a4. Okay, they survived the attack. There is no rook h7, because the bishop e6 controls the h3 square, and here black has 3 pawns on the queen side, and especially the a4 pawn is very dangerous. How to continue here? I offer you to pause the video and find a good way here for white. Okay, for continuing the attack, white need to deal with the bishop on e6, which controls very important square on h3. In the game was played bishop e2, with the idea to play g4. If instead of bishop e2 you say g4 instantly, this is very strong as well. The idea after bishop g4 is to play bishop h3, some kind of trapping the bishop on g4. If bishop h3, rook h3, there is no defense against rook h7 or rook h8. And after bishop h3, bishop h5, now there are different ways to win the game. The easiest one is rook h5. Gh5, rook g3 check, king f8, and now rook g7 with the idea rook h7, rook h8. The difference compared to the previous variation which I have shown you, bishop h3 controls the d7 square and black cannot run with king e8, king d7. Okay, let's go back then. Black played here a4, and now if you say the g4, it's great. If you say bishop e2 with the idea to play g4, that's great too. But if the second one with bishop e2, here I have a question for you. What if black plays here a3 and after g4 a2? Are you free to pause the video and think? Okay, now if you play rook dh3 after a1 queen, rook h7, queen d4, suddenly here black is first. Because if king g2, queen e4 there is a check, and if king f3 or king f1, the rook on a8 joins from a3 or a1. That's why after a3, g4, a2. The easy one is rook h7. With the idea rook h8 with checkmate, and the h3 square bishop e6 is not controlling. If king h7, rook h3 check, king g8, rook h8, goodbye. After bishop e2, black played here rook a5, and after g4 they resign. There is no defense against rook dh3. A very cool game by Max Euwe. In the beginning he did very good with the strategy.